Hi, everybody, and welcome to TNM Coaching Unplugged podcast and Zoran Todorovic Interconnected. We're so grateful and happy that you're with us again today. You know the Jazz, it's the space where you elevate your heart, you elevate your mind, you elevate your soul, you get inspired with the new tools, skills, and abilities to live the best possible life that you can live. And today we have a very special guest who is a dear friend of mine and colleague coach, Wayne Caskey. Wayne has had a very dynamic coaching career. He was a 3-time CEO with startup and medium-sized companies. Prior to that, he was C-level with the 2 Fortune 500 companies, group operations YP, chief administrative officers as well. He has been an executive coach for more than 20 years with more than 3,500 hours of coaching, which is in our industry a lot of coaching hours. He actively coaches CEOs, C-level entrepreneurs, and their immediate reports. He's also has diversity of experiences. He has coached in over than 150 industries as well. And, he is actively communicating and contributing to many of the coaching schools and writes the columns and so on and so forth. So he is an amazing guy, amazing experienced coach. And I'm so grateful and happy to have Wayne with us today. Welcome, Wayne.
Thank you. This sounds very impressive. I'd like to meet him.
Okay, let's meet Wayne. I would love to get to know him as well. So it will be a wonderful podcast when we're going to meet you once again.
Right. I must also say that Zoran was my coach for about 1.5 years. It was a long time ago, but nevertheless, it was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, our coaching experience was absolutely wonderful, and it was joy and pleasure and honor to be somebody to coach you. So we share passion for coaching. We also share passions for spirituality. Even though you have coached in big organizations, you're working with executives, I know that we have a commonality when it comes to deeper level of coaching. So I would like to explore coaching with you today. So after this beautiful, amazing career that you're still, engaged with, what do you love about coaching the most?
Well, coaching, it permits me. Well, it rewards me. I guess that's the best way to describe it. It rewards me with getting to know my clients many of them at the deepest level. And so a connection at that level is then possible. And there aren't a lot of relationships, certainly in a business, which coaching also is, where you get that kind of connection possibility and opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So there is a deeper connection with our clients at this deeper level of relating and really understanding their life inside out. And what happens when you start coaching somebody? Is it easy for them to connect with you on a deeper level, or does it take a little bit of time for people to arrive to that point?
It depends. It depends on the person. It depends on their level of comfort generally. It depends on their level of comfort with me. Sometimes it takes longer than other times because they need to feel that it's okay, and they need to want to do it. Some people may not want to. I mean, they may be attracted, but then when they get close to it, they may just say, that's really not for me. I think it's getting through that period and getting to the place where we're comfortable with each other, which is not only important, but it's the overall important thing in starting coaching.
And I know that you've coached a lot of executives, so let's focus a little bit more on the executive coaching. So when the executives come, to coaching conversation, what do you feel, or what did you see from experiences, the support that actually they really need?
Well, it varies. Some of them may be perfectly competent in the executive position, but they need personal support. They may be neglecting their loved ones. They may be on the edge of burnout in their careers. They may feel like they're imposters. The imposter syndrome certainly hits high-level CEOs as well as anybody else. In fact, maybe even more so, maybe not in terms of it's what they have to overcome in the beginning. Unless if they don't feel it, then good for them. But some people say, how did I get here and what am I doing here?
So what happened in my life? How did I end up being in this?
Right. Yes, I woke up and I was CEO today.
So do you really see that this is the case when people on the top, like executives and CEOs, do feel lonely? Is that correct assessment? Because I keep on hearing this a lot, and when I coach as well, people share this. From your perspective, is that true?
It depends. It depends on how they react to the position. Because if they feel that because they're in this sort of the court of ultimate appeal, that they have to be, well, standoffish is too strong, but they have to have a clear mind, and it cannot be affected. Their decisions can't be affected by emotions. Now, some CEOs accept their emotions and realize for them that the emotional aspect of decisions is very important, and that they listen to their hearts as well as their heads when they make decisions. And part of being a good coach is understanding how they make decisions and how much is heart and how much is head, whether they've repressed something, whether it would help to bring it forward, whether it would hurt to bring it forward. That's something that a coach really needs to sense. And then, because one size doesn't fit all.
A lot of the CEOs, of course, very intelligent, very intellectual. They don't take hard into considerations. They make rational decisions and they move forward. So for me, it's interesting that in your coaching approach, you invite CEOs and executives to connect to the heart and really understand how do they make decisions.
I invite it. Some may be scared of it and they may choose not to. And that's okay too. But I always make the invitation.
And why would people be afraid of the emotions and not choose to invite it?
It may be that it may be rooted in anger. It may be rooted in childhood experiences. It may be rooted in hurt, that they may have opened themselves up in a family situation, in a romantic situation, and been hurt. And so they feel they can't do that again.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, the part of vulnerability with the executives and CEOs is extremely important, because more and more when I coach myself, the CEOs and executives, I invite vulnerability for them to be able to soften enough into that connection to the emotional intelligence and to understand that vulnerability, it's also our super strength, because on a certain level, when you're in that position, you have to project the strength, power, assertiveness, decisiveness, agility, the qualities that people are actually looking to receive from, under quotation mark, the powerful CEOs. Go ahead.
I think that's very interesting. I think it's important. And it's also important because you yourself are a CEO, the CEO of TNM. And so to hear that from you is very important to them.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's also took me time to arrive to that point. I remember that shift with one of my coaches when I understood that vulnerability is my superpower, and the more vulnerable I am to myself, the better CEO or better leader I will become myself, and then in turn I will be able to coach others in the most beautiful way as well. But it's not easy because of the how we relate to people in power and what we expect from people in power. So my question to you is like, how do you get people like this? Let's say that this is a client type we're discussing right now, CEO, executive, to really open up to their vulnerability.
Well, I just did it with you. I mean, that's an example right here in the room.
Yeah. I love that you're walking your talk.
Well, I'm a coach after all.
Yeah. I didn't even realize, you know what I mean? You asked me this question, I didn't even realize, oh, wow, I'm opening up now for a vulnerability. I'm talking in front of everybody.
Yes, right. That's it.
So we know that emotional intelligence, that CEOs accessing that part of themselves that you beautifully called heart, it's extremely important. And then the element of that is us accepting and working with our vulnerability, which for me is courage to be imperfect, courage to understand that we all have our weaknesses and strengths, correct?
Yes, that's true. And for myself, and I talked a little bit about this before we went on the air, about 4.5 years ago, my wife died. And I'm now for the last 3 years, in another relationship. But I think that understanding that, it's opened me up to be able to coach people who have become widows or widowers. Because I've endured that pain, and having endured it, I understand some of the vulnerabilities and some of the heartbreak that goes along with it.
Yeah, beautiful. And for me as well, when powerful coaching comes from a true ability for us to empathize and to really understand other people's map of the world. What did they go through? So sometimes when we go through rough experiences like that, I guess our ability to empathize, it's more available. It's more there because you know how somebody else feels, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So, whenever we kind of talk about CEOs and executives and that level of coaching, we also want to introduce spiritual intelligence, which is wisdom. So how do we get our wonderful CEOs and executives to connect to their wisdom from your perspective?
Well, I suppose part of it is to uncover what they have, and how much they have, and where it's located, where it's come from. Coaching young CEOs, and I haven't done a lot of this, but I've done some, young CEOs in tech industries. They may not have had a lot of time to accumulate wisdom. So it's important for them to be able to source what they have. And it's also important for them to realize that what they have is not complete. It's that they're gathering wisdom every day, probably in every way, or if they're not, how they might. I think that the CEOs, the young CEOs, the world is their oyster. They aren't. They're very far away from burnout. They may be working very fast, but because they're new, they haven't experienced the sameness of a high position, an everyday sameness. So they rush through, and they may miss things because they rush through. I mean, miss things for themselves, for the gathering of their own wisdom, because their mind is on the almighty buck, on profit, on what's the business look like next week or next month. In fact, I coach one or two of those currently, where my job is to help them assume a longer view, because it's a matter of survival, but they also have to be able to survive next year and 5 years from now and prosper. So it's important for them to get a sense of appropriate time sequences and how to operate in multiple time sequences at the same time.
And how would you define the multiple time sequences at the same time? What is that for you when you introduce that concept?
Well, it varies.
Mm-hmm.
Was thinking about entrepreneurs because literally some of that time sequence may be tomorrow or next week.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know, even if they've been successful in the immediate past, they don't know that that's going to continue. Exactly. And they can see some things which could materially interfere with it and prohibit success. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like they're always running scared. We made it through last week, thank God. Something like that. But they don't have in a sense, it's faith in themselves. They haven't had the experience of overcoming enough problems, adversity, to be able to know that they can do it again and again and again. Yeah. They also, and this is something that I've run into, and I'm sure you have, that there are a lot of people in entrepreneurial endeavors that can build the business to a certain spot, mm-hmm. and then can't build it further. Mm-hmm. And it's hard when it happens, but we know it happens. And so then the question becomes, when you're a coach, how do you deal with that?
Exactly.
And it can involve having your client realize that he or she is only capable of a certain level. And more importantly, being not satisfied may not be the right word, but looking for other places, whether it's not-for-profit activity, mm-hmm. Whether it's relationships at home, mm-hmm. so that they're in a position to feel that they're growing anyway, even mm-hmm. if the business, say, at 5 million or 10 million, is probably where it's going to be with them. That's where it's going to stay. Now, that's an achievement in and of itself, but it may not seem that way to them.
Exactly, because they hit the limit. And I think that's an interesting question. What happens when people are not able, for any reason, to move the business forward? What is lacking in their heart, in their mind, and in their capabilities, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what is lacking? If somebody is listening and is saying, "Oh, I fall into that category. My God, I'm either entrepreneur within the organization who is extremely entrepreneurial, mm-hmm. and it's developing the new business for the big organization. So they brought it up to a certain level, or we have an entrepreneur who is running the tech business or whatever business it is, and they bring them to that level, and there is a ceiling. What is missing?"
Mm-hmm. Well, you have a global business. So in your experience, now you certainly must have had times when you felt that it wasn't growing fast enough.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. So, what did you and your coach do at that time?
We looked into strategy. We looked into business development from a perspective of the potential, like really assessing what is this business for and how this business can create impact. And this is something that I felt was extremely meaningful to overcome this barrier of growing further, to really understand the potential that business can bring. And I think from that level of potential, then the practical steps, the strategy.
So let me inquire a little bit further. When you focused on impact, mm-hmm. what came to mind and what then did you work at?
In my specific business, that impact was on the business level, evolving corporate employees to be able to run businesses of the future. So that was the impact. How can we coach, train, and evolve CEOs and executives and mid managers as well, and first-time managers to be ready to deliver on that purpose.
Yes. And that's very important because the world is changing and changing faster and faster.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for me, when we touch that purpose, what is the real purpose? Then that unlocked the way forward. Because sometimes when you are not looking into the essence of what really wants to happen or needs to happen, then the solutions are difficult and we reach the limitations. But if you get essential, the creativity unleashes, the breakthrough idea comes, the clarity of what is the evolution necessary. Because, in my case, for example, I needed to learn something new. I needed to acquire a new skill. I needed to open up my mind. I needed to have a diversity of the team. I needed to, there was a learning curve that was not clear before, and now it's clear.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a specific question. Do coaches have to fear about artificial intelligence?
Do coaches have to fear about artificial intelligence?
Yes.
Wayne, we're opening a very interesting territory.
And how does a coaching profession deal with that?
I've been in the courses for different leaders, basically, studying artificial intelligence as well. And then we also run a course which is called UNAI, which is part of the T&M coaching offering as well. Mm-hmm. And whenever people ask me this question, I have one simple answer. It really depends who is programming the artificial intelligence.
Okay. So are you going to become one who does program artificial intelligence?
That's the breakthrough. Are we, or is it somebody else with the profit in mind, with the short-term view in mind, generate as much as data as possible to manipulate market and to kind of get to the certain point? So, either we program it or it programs us.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's an interesting question, and everybody's doubting because it breeds certain level of fear, right? For all of us.
Yes.
And the more conscientious we are, the more aware we are, we understand the implications of application of the AI. And I think that we are at the very beginning. We didn't even understand the super AI. We're just at the, Alexa, ChatGPT. This is a very rudimentary use of AI. When the AI accelerates in its development and becomes sentient and aware of itself, then we have an interesting issues or opportunities.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So do you aspire to coaching in artificial intelligence?
To become with AI to work alongside with coach? Do you mean like that?
In other words, coach the AI.
I would love to coach the AI in the most beautiful way.
Okay. How would you do it? How would you approach it?
Yeah. That's a very big question. It's all about creating relationship, right, with the AI on a certain level. The challenge is, for me, is a definition that AI doesn't have emotion, but it's only clearly intelligent, and it's following the sequences of thoughts. Would it be able to comprehend and understand the complexities of human beingness? And would it be able to really coach the human beings if it doesn't have the emotion? That's challenge. So to answer your question, would I be coaching AI? Absolutely. To what extent? I don't know. And what would be the impact? I don't know, because of the lack of emotion.
Right.
What about you?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It would be a challenge for me because I'm used to dealing with human beings that have some emotion, or at least are subject to having emotions. And I'm not sure, I don't have, an artificial intelligence sitting right here. but I would suspect if I did, it wouldn't understand emotions. Or maybe if it did, from an intellectual standpoint, it wouldn't feel any. And so I'm not sure. And maybe that's where the threat of it is, that it is completely rational, or at least I understand it. It may very well be completely rational. If it's completely rational and we start listening only to it, then what happens to us?
Exactly. What happens to our emotions, what happens to our feelings, what happens to the complexity of human nature, of human beingness? Yeah, that's a big, big, big question. And I think many people are asking that question right now. It's very relevant. Even the executives on top of the organizations, they're looking into how can we work alongside with AI so the AI can become an ally, meaning that the jobs that do take a lot of time, energy, and effort, like reporting, researching, being able to create powerful presentation, can we delegate those tasks to AI so that we can have more space for creativity, innovation, breakthrough thinking, and strategy, basically, so that we can accelerate on the creative level, where the AI would take care of more of the practical tasks and executing. I think that application is really important, but that requires relationship with the AI so that we are working alongside with each other.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think from coaching, when you ask question, would AI be a good coach? AI can ask wonderful coaching questions, right? It can understand the sequences based on your answers. But would it be able to listen deeply into what it has been not said, that we will be able to sense? Like when you ask a powerful coaching questions, it's coach, and somebody responds back to you. And this is for people who don't know how to coach. Sometimes you hear what client is saying, but also you hear what client is not saying. You pick it up, right?
Yes.
So you're not only listening for the right answers, you're listening for the details of a facial expression, the energy, the how we mimic, micro facial expressions, and so on and so forth. So on that level, AI will need to really evolve to be able to do all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So coming back home to the executive coach and CEO, now that the time is speeding up, the technology that we are facing, it's accelerating, right? People are having less and less time. There's more and more pressure. Everything is going faster and faster. And what I love that the energy that you brought in one of the conversations throughout this podcast is that you ask your coaching clients, especially executives, to think things through, to slow down a little bit, to be able to map the timelines. How do you show up in this space to help people to be more present, to be more grounded, to be more connected to themselves, to slow down a little bit in order for them to hear themselves think and to feel themselves how they feel and to really be able to relate to them? So,
well, it's part, I will slow down, physically slow down the pace of my questions. And that brings a kind of a slowdown to the interaction. I'll also go deeper with my questions. And so they need then to take time to answer the question that I've asked, or to comment, or they need to make maybe not a full personal inventory, but they need to inventory for themselves in order to find what they feel is a truthful answer to my question. So that's part of the way I do it. The follow-up question too, if they have done some of that slowing down, then the follow-up questions are important, because that's when you can really they can get further led into the meat of the answers. So, well, this is what you said about your feeling to your wife. Where do those feelings come from? And what's the history of those feelings? Have those feelings evolved? It's those kind of questions which then lead them deeper.
Yeah, and I think for people who are listening to this podcast, you can already feel when Wayne slowed down, how everything slows down. And I think that one of the most important things for us coaching ourselves and then CEOs, executives, people in the business is to create that space of stillness, the space when we can slow down, when we can contemplate. And I love this favorite quote of one of my clients. Zoran, you really facilitated space for me so I can hear myself thinking. And I was never aware of my thoughts as well because things were happening so fast, let alone the feelings, like, and I think this is golden space of coaching is to enable you listeners who are listening to this podcast and thinking, is coaching writing for me? I'm executive, I'm CEO. What would I get out of it? One of the biggest takeout is the space to contemplate, think, reflect, and to slow down.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think CEOs already know what needs to be done. Even with what you mentioned, imposter syndrome, coming into the position, not knowing how we ended up here, feeling insecure because a lot of the expectations from business, from the stakeholders, from the, from your family, community, it's a position of power. Sometimes we can get insecure, in our skills and abilities. So I think the coaching also provides the space for CEO who is a human being, an executive who is a human being, to process those insecurities and to have a stronghold, which is coach, in a confidential space to really share exactly how they feel at this moment in time. And we know once when we share certain things about ourselves, then, we know what to do about it. We know how to move through this and we can release it. It doesn't need to hinder us any longer. So that's another beautiful takeout, ability to be fully yourself as an executive and coach. And also, coaching for me, for those type of clients, provides a space for the breakthrough thinking, because a lot of the people are now challenged in this position to innovate, to create new business, to create new solutions, to be agile, this whole being agile, that everybody needs to be agile all the time,
That's it. And to choose which solutions to follow. I mean, there may be multiple solutions. So exactly. Which one or ones are you going to throw money at? Which one or ones are you going to put aside for the moment? And how do you determine that? What's your process, your thinking process? And does it involve feelings? And what role do the feelings have in such a decision? And uncovering those, either from the standpoint of not having them be determinative, or in the standpoint of enfolding them in the decision.
Yeah, and also, confirming on that. When I coach, I don't know how it is with you, Wayne. When I coach people, a lot of the decisions the CEOs make are based on their intuition and gut feeling. What feels right. Sometimes we think things through, and they make sense, right? And you can make choice based on what makes sense, what is the right direction. It's a depth in decision making that people tune into themselves and feel that inner knowing that we call gut feeling, intuition, then make the decision that feels right.
Right. And what are you going to do as a CEO in sponsoring or downplaying gut feelings of your subordinates?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. How can we create a fertile environment for that voice to be heard and understood, instead of justifying, explaining, and rationalizing our thoughts? So yeah, there's a wealth of things, beautiful things that can happen in the coaching space for executives and CEOs.
Yes.
Alongside in learning how to work with the emotional intelligence, and also spiritual intelligence, and also wisdom, and also the AI at the end. This is a current topic for all of us. So Wayne, how would you like to leave audience with anything that you would love to drop in as a tip, as a piece of wisdom, or as a practice for people who are listening? In this case, managers, executives, CEOs, what do we want them to practice or think about or reflect?
Well, for those of you who are not in coaching, on the basis of this podcast, what's your reaction? Does it intrigue you? Is it something that you'd like to explore? Is there someone you'd like to explore it with? And I think that's a question. That's one question that I think they would want to ask themselves. Or they might want to say, does this sound like something that would be helpful for one or two of my reports? And who would I talk to about that? How would I go about finding a coach who I would feel was appropriate for that particular person or persons? I think those are the things that they might want to explore.
In a true beautiful fashion of coaching, big open questions to contemplate and reflect on.
Mm-hmm.
Really good. So thank you so much, Wayne, for coming, to this podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I hope that the audience, you got inspired with our chat. We went places all the way from what is the benefit of coaching, why is coaching good, what Wayne loves about coaching. Mm-hmm. He mentioned being able to connect deeply, to listen deeply, to really get to this moment of the breakthrough, transformational conversation, to all the challenges that CEOs and executives are facing right now. What are the common patterns that we can see? How can coaching serve you if you're in a position of being mid-level manager, executive, or CEO in your life, in your business? How can it be a tool and stronghold? We looked into vulnerability and emotional intelligence. And how can you give yourself permission to be vulnerable enough to show up from the position of power? And we look into the wonderful AI and how can we use AI in our everyday work life, and how can we coach the AI, to the tips and tricks to why do we believe coaching is really appropriate discipline to support CEOs and executives to become the best possible versions of themselves and the most successful versions of themselves. So enjoy. Dear audience, thank you so much for joining week after week and exploring your life and your business with T&M Coaching Unplugged podcast. And once again, Wayne, lovely to have you. And we cannot wait for you to coach as many people as they come your way after listening to this podcast.
Okay. Thanks very much, Zoran. It was a joy to be with you.
Thank you. Bye for now.